Haven't we had a good day? We have. We've had a very good day. Oh, we have. Just sort of hanging out and talking. Yes. Yes. Hello, BookTube, and welcome to your Daily Penguin. As I mentioned in another video today, I am feeling very much under the weather, and in addition to that, I'm also dealing with a bit of hay fever, so I'm going to keep this fairly short. And that's ironic in a way, because the Penguin Classic that we're dealing with today is something that I could talk about for 4 straight hours. Easily. Easily. I could also succumb and just read you huge chunks of it. It's one of my favorite books of all time. It's a book that I go back to over and over and over again. Even though it has reached the point where I know the contents so well that I don't really need to go back at all. And it is Jungle Books by Rudyard Kipling. The adventures, animal stories, mainly set in India, and many of which star a human boy named Mowgli, who is orphaned, or rather detached from his Indian village and raised by the Seoni wolf pack in the jungle as a wolf, and considers the wolves to be his brothers, but is nevertheless a man. And he learns the law of the jungle from Baloo the bear, and he learns the ways of the jungle from Bagheera the Black Panther, who was born in a cage. Bagheera, before he broke the lock of the cage with one swipe of his paw, he was raised in the royal city and born in a cage, knows the ways of man, still has a raw spot on his neck where his collar was. But by the time Mowgli meets him, he is one of the most feared predators in the jungle, the other being Shere Khan, the tiger, who is lame and who hates Mowgli. And there's also Kaa, the enormous rock python, who becomes eventually, in my favorite Mowgli story, Kaa's Hunting, becomes a friend of Mowgli. They are friends already at the beginning of the story, but they become battle brothers. And that story, Kaa's Hunting, which I would happily read you from beginning to end, is the uneasy alliance between Bagheera, Baloo, and Kaa as they rush to a deserted city, the Cold Lairs, to free Mowgli from the clutches of the Bandar-log, the monkey people. And it's terrifying. It's a fantastic story. And it underscores Baloo and Bagheera's reaction to Kaa, underscores that Kaa is, although an ally, not a friend. He is distinctly alien. And all the other animals in the jungle, whether it's a Mowgli story or not, one of the most famous stories in here that's not a Mowgli story is Rikki Tikki Tavi, about a valorous mongoose fighting a pair of cobras who have taken up residence in an English farmhouse and are a danger to everyone, including all the nearby animals. But all the other animals in the Mowgli stories are perfectly delineated. There's the jackal, there's the porcupine, there are the wolves of the Seoni wolf pack, including its increasingly old and infirm leader, and also Mowgli's adopted parents, and bunches of other characters that are just perfectly done. Kipling was familiar with India, but he wrote these stories in Vermont. He wrote most of the works. He stayed in Vermont in the, does it tell me, the 1890s? 1892 to 1896. He stayed in Vermont, and it was during that period that he wrote a lot of the stuff that we know him for. A lot of his most popular work. I mean, he shot to fame and notice with Playing Tales from the Hills and Backroom Ballads, and a sort of jingoistic military verse and stories that made him the talk of the book world. But the things that really achieved him his immortality were written in Vermont, not in England and not in India. That period in his life was the subject of a biography just recently that was really good. But and great many of his other works. Kipling is a great many of his other works are really good. Kipling is an example of something that we have seen in our Daily Penguin, and we will see it again. An author who has been badly misserved by posterity, by their own posterity. I don't know of an example off the top of my head of much worse than that factor when it comes to Kipling. He is read with a sneer, if he's read at all these days, and he's never read for pleasure. He's never assigned in schools except as a cautionary tale about imperialism and colonialism, with not a word said about his literary ability, and no attention given whatsoever to the works that he wrote in the last 10 years of his life, all of which are out of print, all of which are amazing. He was a complex, multifaceted thinker about war and empire and his own country. Uh, all of his works should be in print in multiple editions at all times. All of them should be studied and enjoyed, and they aren't. But you get a little bit of a taste of that in the tiny handful of books that of his that are remembered largely without criticism or without that kind of uh, retroactive judgment. Kim is a widely regarded as his best full-length novel. The Jungle Books are well remembered. The Just So stories are well remembered. Bits and pieces of them are anyway, or stories here and there. Uh, I don't think there's anything like literary justice in that, but I don't make the rules. So I would love it if this Penguin Classic video were one of those where I hold up a whole shelf of an author and say, well, here you go. We can't do a video on every one of these, so I'm just going to do a long video on all of these, on the whole shelf of Rudyard Kipling. But as far as I know, Penguin they make the Jungle Books. I think they make the Just So stories. Maybe they almost certainly do a volume of Kim. I don't think I have any of those, but I'm pretty sure they do. They might do a volume of poetry, but not a collected poetry, not a complete poetry. They don't do a big book of short stories. There was somebody recently, one of you will know, recently somebody did a very nice big volume of Kipling's eerie and fantastic supernatural stories. It was very well produced. It was a very good book, very well chosen. Just every time you get a volume like that of this author, no matter what he's writing about, fiction or nonfiction, every time you get a volume like that just hoists itself across your desk and you read it with temporarily forgetting all of the presuppositions that have been drilled into your head about this author, universally the reaction is, God almighty, that stuff's good. This guy's really, really good. That is universally the reaction. And then the reminders come. You're not supposed to like him. Keep that in mind. You're not supposed to like him. So I don't have that shelf of Penguins to show you. I don't have a complete Kipling, anything like it, here at Hyde Cottage, here in this little book room. Even though I've read it all and love it all, I grab attractive editions of him wherever I find them. And of course, I'm pretty sure that almost everything that he wrote is available for free at Project Gutenberg and places like that. But as far as for-profit reprint houses, as far as the latest long, lovingly interpretive essay in the New York Review of Books that becomes the introduction to a volume, as far as I know, there's nothing like that for this author, and that's a terrible shame. That's on par with dismissing Robert Louis Stevenson as a kid's author, or dismissing, for instance, Sir Walter Scott completely, and it's a terrible, terrible shame. But it need not detract from our Daily Penguin today, which is wonderful. And the stories of Mowgli, if we want to concentrate on them, progress from the earliest ones where he is just a baby to the crucial early ones when he decides to confront Shere Khan and eventually kills Shere Khan. Not through brute strength, he's not Tarzan, but through man-style cunning, and on. Mowgli is ineluctably drawn to humans, to human villages. He has scorn for them. He loves his jungle brethren, but he finds himself drawn to human villages. It happens a few times, and they are sources of absolute terror for his animal friends. The red flower is what all the jungle associates with human villages. The red flower being gunfire, being guns. The fire and guns that must not ever be encountered. The law of the jungle says 7 times 7 never kill man. And Shere Khan the tiger is only allowed one night a year where he can kill a human with impunity. According to ancient jungle lore, there's only one Night of the Tiger. All the rest of it, it's a shameful thing to do. Humans weave their way through these stories, sometimes alive. There's a loutish head hunter in the village that is a perfect example of what Kipling can do as a combination of scorn and comedy, much like Thersites in the Iliad. And there's also humans who are long gone, like the great story of the King's Ankus, where Mowgli and Bagheera basically trace the past of one particular object and extrapolate on the humans who must have owned it and what they must have been like. But over the course of these stories, while we're dealing with all kinds of things, an invading horde of red dogs, a drought, all kinds of other things, while we're dealing with all of those things, Mowgli is slowly being drawn back to the world of man. It's natural. He can't help it. Until the final story, which Kipling actually refers to as the final story. He says, and this is the last of the Mowgli stories, that is at the end of the story, The Spring Running, which is great. The spring running happens right after Red Dog and a little bit after Letting the Jungle In, which is just an amazing meditation on Kipling's part on the wilderness, on man's relationship with the wilderness. Also a fantastic story. All of these things are fantastic stories first. But there are also other things, too. So dismissing these as children's stories is just as insane as dismissing Stevenson as a children's author. But at the end of every one of these stories, there's a poem that doesn't so much summarize it as comments on it. And the poem at the end of Spring Running is the last of the Mowgli poems. I thought I would read it to you. Even though I feel like crap, I love talking to you, and I love this poem. And the poem takes the form, it's called the Outsong, and it takes the form of Mowgli's three friends singing their parting advice to him. And the parting advice is always specific to the animal and always specific to the jungle, but it's quickly obvious that this parting advice comes from the same pen as the author who wrote If, who's good at dispensing advice, life advice, and good at drawing parallels between the advice you would get in the jungle and the advice you would get in the real world. The law of the jungle, part of the law of the jungle, is actually written out as a verse in one of these earlier stories, and it is from first to last a commentary on human society. But I want to read you the Outsong, because this is as Mowgli is leaving the jungle. He's going back to the village, and he's not going to return. Kipling's own notes, we know that he grows up and becomes just a human, has a job, wears a suit and tie and shoes and a hat. Now, the very last verse of this sometimes makes me choke up, so we'll have to deal with that. I hope not. I hope I can get through it all. First one is from Baloo, the old bear, who has grown older and whiter and blinder as the stories have gone on, because time passes in these stories. Mowgli's wolf parents get older. The leader of the Seoni pack gets older. Everybody gets older. Baloo's verse is this: for the sake of him who showed one wise frog the jungle road. The frog is what Mowgli means. Frog is the translation of his animal name. Keep the law the man pack make, for thy blind old Baloo's sake. Clean or tainted, hot or stale, hold it as if it were the trail, through the day and through the night, questing neither left nor right. For the sake of him who loves thee beyond all that moves, when thy pack would make thee pain, say, Tabaki sings again. That is, Tabaki is just a contemptuous animal in the jungle. It means ignore it. When thy pack would make thee pain, say, Tabaki sings again. When thy pack would work thee ill, say, Shere Khan is yet to kill. Meaning, concentrate on the glory to come. Concentrate on the bigger mission. Don't, if they're trying to work you ill, ignore it, because there's still Shere Khan out there to kill. When thy pack would work thee ill, say, Shere Khan is yet to kill. When the knife is drawn to slay, keep the law and go thy weight. Root and honey, palm and spathe, guard a cub from harm and scathe. Wood and water, wind and tree, jungle favor go with thee. That's Baloo's song to his former charge, who he's been teaching the law for the whole of the stories. Then we have Ka, the great rock python. Anger is the egg of fear. Only lidless eyes are clear. Cobra poison none may leech, even so with cobra speech. Open talk shall call to thee strength whose mate is courtesy. Send no lunge beyond thy length, lend no rotten bough thy strength. Gauge thy gape with buck or goat, lest thine eye should choke thy throat. After gorging, wouldst thou sleep? Look, thy den is hid and deep, lest a wrong by thee forgot draw thy killer to the spot. East and west, north and south, wash thy skin and close thy mouth. Pit and rift and blue pool brim, middle jungle, follow him. Wood and water, wind and tree, jungle favor, go with thee. And that is really good. It's in character for Kaa, and you can also see that it's odd. It's alien. And then Bagheera, last of all. Because although Mowgli likes Kaa and respects Baloo, despite what you might remember from the Disney cartoon, his deepest love is for the Black Panther. And Bagheera's verse goes like this: In the cage my life began, well I know the ways of man. By the broken lock that freed, man cub, where the man cubs breed. Beware, meaning beware the man cubs breed. Scenting dew or starlight pale, choose no idle tree cat trail. Pack or council, hunt or den, cry no truce with jackal men. Feed them silence when they say, come with us an easy way. Feed them silence when they seek help of thine to hurt the weak. Make no Bandar's boast of skill. That refers to the Bandar log, the monkey people. Make no Bandar's boast of skill. Hold thy peace above the kill. Let nor call, nor song, nor sign turn thee from thy hunting line. Morning mist or twilight clear, serve him, wardens of the deer. Wood and water, wind and tree, jungle favor, go with thee. And then, at the end, all three sing together. It's not very long. But they're saying goodbye, and so are we. The reader is saying goodbye to this wonderful world and these wonderful characters who've been in it, in so many of these stories. All three sing this final verse together. On the trail that thou must tread, to the threshold of our dread, where the blossom fires red, through the nights when thou shalt lie, prisoned from our mother sky, hearing us, thy loves, go by. In the dawns when thou shalt wake, to the toil thou canst not break, heartsick for the jungle's sake, wood and water, wind and tree, jungle favor, go with thee. And that's devastating, right? That's not a happy ending. That's certainly not, it certainly belies the idea that these were written for children. The clear reality that Mowgli's friends know is that he's going to be miserable in man's world, and that he's going to be close enough to hear them, his loves, howling in the night, totally free, calling to each other, the life of the jungle going on while he is imprisoned from our mother sky, where he's working, slaving, the toil that thou canst not break. I just think that's wonderful. Just wonderful, wonderful stuff, and a good indication of Kipling the poet that is sneered at, as I mentioned, in New York intelligentsia circles. He is sneered at as a poet. He's nevertheless very, very good, but from an era when your goodness as a poet was determined by your craft, by your ability to create something that was both beautiful and smart and memorable within a metrical framework. Gone are those days. But also, in addition to giving you a good taste of Kipling the poet, it also gives you a good taste of the stories, which are much, much better, much more than they appear on the surface as just fantastic animal stories. So, your Penguin Classic for today is an overwhelming recommend. I'm not sure that I'm not maybe overselling it. That's only because this book has meant everything to me. One of a handful. I mean, I love the canon, of course. I love the classics of the canon, but there are some books that mean more to me than others, and they don't always mean that way on their literary merit. I think there's a huge amount of overlooked literary merit in these stories, and in Kipling just in general. But even if there weren't, this would still be right up there with The Hound of the Baskervilles or The Book of Merlin by T.H. White. This would be right up there as something that I read and read and read and read, that I go to because I need it, in addition to because I love it. So your Penguin Classic for today is a recommend. If you haven't tried these stories, try one or two of them and see what you think of them. But read them in order. Start with the first Jungle. The reason this is called the Jungle Books is because Kipling wrote a book called the Jungle Book, and then he wrote the second Jungle Book. Read them in order. Don't if you can, if you have the ability, don't bounce all around. Unless it's a totally self-contained story, like Rikki Tikki Tavi. But if it's a Mowgli story, better to follow Mowgli's story from the beginning, when he's found as a baby. And Raksha, the wolf, takes him into her den. And Shere Khan is hunting for him, and sticks his enormous head inside her den and says the man cub is mine. He's mine to eat, in other words. You have no right to keep him. And of course, it's her den. And he's literally challenging a mother wolf in her den. And as Kipling says in that story, it was at that moment that everyone, including Shere Khan, remembered that Raksha means demon. And that Shere Khan was risking a lot to make this claim, and he backs off because he's a coward. But you want to start with that story and then move on from there, I would think, if you're reading about Mowgli. But the stories will work either way. Some of the Mowgli stories are self-contained. How Fear Came, or The King's Ankus, are self-contained stories that will work on you. I believe they will. So I'm going to wrap this up for now. That is your Penguin for today. Long time in the coming. This is the Jungle Books by Rudyard Kipling. If I feel up to it, I will make a Penguin video tomorrow, and if I do, who knows what we will encounter. So I'll wrap this up for now, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.